Douglas Ross, thank you very much for joining us. Tell me, if you become First Minister, what is the most important policy for you to bring change to Scotland?
It's absolutely our recovery. We've come through the worst 12 months anyone could imagine. So many sacrifices from individuals, families, businesses and communities, and we've got to focus on our recovery. So I've got plans for education, plans to protect jobs, plans to stimulate our economy, but none of that can happen if we still have a focus on independence. The Nationalists want to take us back to that debate over another independence referendum, and that puts at threat everything we're trying to do to recover as a country.
Is it the case a vote for the Scottish Conservatives is a clear vote to say no to anti-indyref2?
We're the only party saying that. I think it's sad that we haven't heard from the other opposition parties that they would oppose another independence referendum in the same way we are. We can see the threat from Nicola Sturgeon's Nationalists or Alex Salmond's Nationalists that they want to take our Parliament and our politics back to the division of the past. You can't have a recovery and a referendum. That's why we've got to stop the Nationalists getting that majority so we can have our recovery.
If the Nationalists do get that majority, the SNP get that majority, is it the case that then they will have a mandate for a second referendum?
Well, I don't want to get to that stage. I don't want our politics, like it has for the last 14 and a half years while the SNP have been in power, to be dominated by that subject. Rather than trying to protect people's jobs, rather than trying to support our NHS, you can do none of that. You can't have a recovery while you've got a referendum. But it doesn't matter, because the Prime Minister had basically been taken out of the equation with the Nationalists saying they'll go ahead with a referendum regardless. That's the threat. If you vote Nationalists, you're voting for another referendum and that division of the past. And I think,
that's an interesting thing you said there, if I can just pick you up on that, Mr Ross, is that you're saying if you vote Nationalist, you are voting for another referendum. That kind of gives some legitimacy to this being a referendum on a referendum. You vote Conservative, you're saying no to another referendum. You're saying if you vote SNP, you're saying yes to another referendum. So that is almost a democratic way for people in Scotland to tell you that they can hear your argument, that they can hear Nicola Sturgeon's argument, and if they say by majority they want another independence referendum, do you respect the democratic will?
But we know even people who support independence are saying now is not the time to take us through that division of the past. Now is not the time to have our politics and our Parliament focused on a referendum.
But you've just said that people know that those are the choices. Democratically, do you respect that if the SNP get the majority, that they have a mandate, as much as that you want them to respect that if people of Scotland don't give the majority, there's no mandate?
Well, that's what I'm saying. The people of Scotland can decide. They can stop the SNP getting a majority, and the only way to do that is to vote Scottish Conservatives. We won't support another independence referendum. We haven't heard that from Scottish Labour Party or Scottish Liberal Democrats. They're not willing to work with me and the other parties to stop another independence referendum, and we can only do that. We can only stop the Nationalists, stop that majority, by voting Scottish Conservative in the same way people did 5 years ago. In 2016, we stopped SNP government being formed as a majority, and we stopped their plans for another referendum.
I'm not going to push on any more on this, but just the final word on it. Is there a way for the people of Scotland to tell you in a way that you will accept democratically that they want a second independence referendum?
Well, we had that referendum in 2014, and if people vote for the SNP, they are endorsing their policies for another independence referendum.
And you will accept that?
And if they get a majority, people have to accept that our Parliament is again going to be dominated by the arguments of a divisive independence referendum. I don't want that, and people can stop that by voting Scottish Conservative.
Will you accept that they would have a mandate?
I'm saying if you vote SNP, you are endorsing their plans for another divisive referendum. Vote Scottish Conservative, you can stop that.
Okay. On the issue of the COVID recovery, young people in this country have been really heavily affected in many ways. Their futures, their golden years of their life, and a lot of them are pretty despondent about their futures just now. What's your message to the young people in this country to give them some hope?
Well, we've got to have a catch-up plan for education. Young people have been out of school over the last 12 months, far more than they've actually been in the classroom. That's why we've committed to a £120 million catch-up premium for every school pupil across the country. We're going to invest over the next Parliament in 3,000 additional teachers, because over the SNP's time in office, they've cut the number of teachers, they've cut the subjects available to young people, they've cut the opportunities for young people. So we want to ensure at school they have all the opportunities they need, with a national tutoring scheme and so many other policies to take them forward. And then when they leave school, I want to give people opportunities. They can choose to go to university, or like me, go to college, or go straight into work, or straight into an apprenticeship, to say there's no wrong turn for a young person in this country. But again, we can't focus on that. We can't focus on education being the number one priority of our Parliament and all our politicians when Nicola Sturgeon and the Nationalists want to take us back to another referendum.
On another constitutional argument that we've been through is Brexit. How is Brexit impacting the future of these young people in Scotland right now?
Well, I think one thing, Brexit's allowing us to roll out the vaccination programme, and the scheme here in Scotland and across the UK has been better than any other country in Europe. So we've just got to look at our way out of this pandemic, the sacrifices people, and particularly young people, have made over the last 12 months. We are seeing a quicker relaxation of the tight restrictions that we've all lived through because of the vaccination programme. When we are filming this just now, just short of 2.5 million people in Scotland have been protected. At the weekend we got through the 30 million barrier in the whole of the UK, protected by a vaccine that is not available in the same numbers, in the same quantities in any other country in Europe.
So you're optimistic about the future with Brexit?
I'm really optimistic about Scotland going forward. I want an optimistic future for Scotland. I don't want the same divisive arguments we've had here over the last 14 years.
There is another public health emergency in Scotland right now with drug deaths. Yep. We've reported on this extensively on ITV News over the last 5 years. What's your plan to reverse this trend? Scotland currently has the worst drug death record in Europe, possibly even the developed world.
Yeah, and that's the worry. You know, this isn't a problem that's just occurred during this pandemic. For years, Scotland has had one of the highest drug deaths anywhere in the world, certainly in Europe and absolutely across the United Kingdom. So we've said for years that we have to reinvest in rehab beds because Nicola Sturgeon and her government took away the funding for rehab facilities. I'm glad she finally listened to Scottish Conservative pressure. So we've got to focus on rehab, invest in rehab facilities. They've gone part of the way, but they need to go further because we can't continue every year to see lives lost and families broken because of drug deaths in Scotland.
What about supervised injection sites, so-called safe injection sites? There's a pilot in Glasgow just now. It seems to be working. If we look around the world, countries that have brought them in, they do reduce drug deaths, they do also reduce HIV and other bloodborne viruses. They're saving lives and saving families. Will you support them?
I'm not in favour of drug consumption rooms.
Why not?
I've looked at the evidence, and there is evidence that supports them, but there is also evidence to suggest it doesn't tackle the problem completely. I do.
Of course, not on its own, but I'm just saying, is it part of the solution? You want, like, if we as a country invest in rehab, that in itself is also not a silver bullet. All of the experts are in agreement. So I'm just curious as to why this is evidentially it works. It saves lives in complementing other approaches. So why not endorse this one as well?
Because I just don't believe in drug consumption rooms are the right approach to take us out. You don't solve the problem by assisting people to take drugs. We need to get people off of drugs as quickly, as safely as possible.
That's a moral argument, though, not an evidential.
But you're right,
argument.
Peter. There's no silver bullet. There's not one solution that will solve our problems. However, we're not going to tackle it if we cut rehab facilities, and that's what the SNP have done over successive budgets. Knowing that Scotland had the worst death rate anywhere in the UK, they still went ahead and cut that budget. They reintroduced it in January of this year. That was welcome, but why did they have to be forced into that? Why did they have to be dragged into investing millions of pounds into drug rehab that they previously cut?
Why is this the one part that the experts recommend will save lives in Scotland that you won't get behind?
Well, experts are not universally in favour of this. You will hear people citing evidence from Portugal and other countries in favour of them, but other experts saying this is not the solution.
Mr. Ross, I've investigated this for 5 years. And I can say objectively as a journalist that the serious experts on this all say that with other approaches, safe supervised injection sites do work, they do save lives, and they do bring down bloodborne viruses. It's not a moral question, it's a science-based question. So I'm just curious, is it a moral objection you have to it?
No, I just don't believe we should be facilitating people taking drugs.
That's a moral objection.
We should be trying as much as possible to get people off of drugs, and we do that through rehab, by working with people in dedicated facilities that were closed down under the Nationalists while we were going through this crisis. And what have we seen as a result? The number of deaths continuing to rise in Scotland. So let's get on top of this. I'll never say no completely. I'll always look at the science, but I do believe drug rehab centres and facilities are the way forward if we can invest in them properly.
You're still to be convinced, fair enough. Looking ahead to the election and rebuilding Scotland, if you look at your political rivals, who do you think that you have the most in common with?
Well, sadly, it doesn't seem anyone at the moment. I'd hope the other parties that were involved in Better Together might say to me, yeah, you're right, Douglas, we need to work together against the threat of the Nationalists. We know the Greens, we know the SNP and the New Alba Party all want to separate Scotland from the rest of the United Kingdom. We know the Scottish Conservatives want to stop that. It just seems Scottish Labour and the Scottish Liberal Democrats are silent on that at the moment. So it seems like, I'm on my own on this one, but if that's the case, if that's how it has to be, then I will stand up for people in Scotland who want us to recover, want us to rebuild as a country, not be distracted by another damaging referendum.
And just a final question. people who don't know, perhaps you're also an assistant referee, commonly known as a linesman. Are you a glutton for punishment?
Well, I enjoy it. You know, it's not a typical bedfellow to be a politician and a football referee. Both of them get a lot of abuse. You take decisions that people disagree with a lot, but I enjoy it, and I enjoy politics, and I'm enjoying this campaign.
Does one help the other?
Well, I think it builds up a thick skin. So whatever people say to me after this interview, Peter, or whatever a journalist throws at me, it's never going to be as bad as what a football fan shouts at me over 90 minutes.
Hopefully I've not been that cruel. Douglas Ross, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.